up to meet you, tell you I'm sorry. You don't know how lovely you are. I had to find you, tell you I need you, tell you I set you apart. Tell me your secrets and ask me your questions. Oh, let's go back to the start. Running in circles, coming in tails, heads on the sides apart. Nobody said it was easy. It's such a shame for us to part. Nobody said it was easy. No one ever said it would be this hard. Oh, take me back to the start. I was just guessing at numbers and figures, putting the puzzles apart.
Next, we're going to hear from two of our team who've helped expand our portfolio of research even further. We're going to hear from Associate Professor Chris Pemberton, who heads the Translational Biodiscovery Lab, who's going to tell us about setting up a commercial venture. And Dr. Alamanda Fartuisi will describe our research looking at heart disease risk factors in Māori and Pacifica communities. Pass it over to Chris P.
Thanks, Vicky. So this is a bit of a tale of upstream medical technologies, a tale of ye oldie biotech upstart. That's actually a photo of the top end of the Waimak River upstream. And when we set this up, one thing that, because I was intimately involved with it, one thing that I demanded was naming rights. And upstream was the choice because A, I like fishing, and you go upstream to get the best fish, and it has all these connotations. This stuff matters in the commercial world. With the establishment of this, everything that you've heard about before, particularly in the assay lab, none of this was possible without the efforts of Gary and Mark and Eric, and particularly Tim. And I'm going to share a very small anecdote about Tim. When I first turned up here as a PhD student, I was very fortunate to have Eric as my supervisor. And I went to the very first meeting, and it was in the Riverside second floor, and the winter sun was streaming in. And anyone who's dealt with Eric, Eric was off, and he was talking about the whole situation. And I sat there and I thought, my God, what have I got myself into? I can't keep up. There's no way. And Tim was in the corner, and I thought, this is it. My head's going to explode. I'm done. And Tim just very quietly said, no, Eric, and said something, and Eric stopped. And I thought, I'm going to pay attention to this man. He has the power. And it's been like that ever since. He's really established a world-leading lab. He is courted by diagnostic companies. They take his opinion very seriously. Everything I'm going to talk about here is not possible without the efforts of him and the lab that he'd created around him. So we had good intentions at the start. So in cardiovascular disease, as you've heard about, clinicians now have great markers. BNP is the marker for heart failure, but also troponin for heart attacks. So if you're having an acute event like that, where there's kind of it's very serious, they're well served with that. What they don't have is a marker for where the heart is insulted by ischemia or some other thing. It doesn't result in terminal death like myocardial infarction or a heart attack where troponin is released from the heart. And you don't have the changes in ventricular wall stress that Eric talked about before. But it's a very serious thing. It's an extremely important precursor. If you have an event like unstable angina, the risk of you having a heart attack within a year is just the same as someone who's had a heart attack at the index. That evidence is now starting to emerge. So there needs to be marker improvements to help guide the clinicians and give them a better heads up for two reasons. One, that you've had an ischemic event, and two, outcomes, what are they going to do about it? So we set off with good intentions to address this situation, to decrease the crowding in congested ERs and also help with provocative tests such as stress testing. And an idea was born, and in the late 2000s we published a number of papers because of the interdigitation and collaboration within the group on signal peptides. And this got a bit of an impact. It was published in the top-end journal at the time, Circulation, and got an editorial recognition, and we published a few more papers after that. And we went and spoke with the wonderful chaps at Otago Innovation and their board, and I have to acknowledge Harleen here. You're still on the board there, yeah, and you were very supportive, and without your support and encouragement, none of this could have happened. And we were met with a rather enthusiastic David Christensen, who turned up in true Harry Potter-like status and said, why don't we set up a company looking to the stars? And I replied in the usual vernacular, that's bloody brilliant, let's do it. So that was established in 2015. Then a very novel experience occurred. So we set about to do the things we were supposed to do with the company, with logistics and reagents and doing the work. And we could partner with the University of Otago and the CHI as well. So it gave us another string to our bow, and that people who invested in the company and the lead investors, we could then subcontract to the CHI and give us another avenue for getting work done that might not always get done. But then the lead investor in 2016, 2017 appeared and disappeareth. We came under the Powerhouse Ventures stable, and that changed in 2019. This was a novel experience. Usually it's the researchers who run out of money. This case, it was the investor who ran out of money because they listed on the ASX, and that happened. That's not a good thing. And so oil really had to do something about this, and they were brilliant, absolutely fantastic. And they went around, and we found a new investor at the beginning of 2017, 2018. And that was a company called Pacific Channel based out of Auckland. And they have been very, very encouraging, very understanding. And they really have their finger on the pulse. And they have invested in the company, but not just the company in terms of they want to make money out of this, right? But they invest in the science and the people. They very strongly believe in that. And so at the moment we have 3 candidates in varying degrees of development. One is a lead marker, which is addressing what I talked about with the ED and ischemia, and that seems to have some potential, and we're going to test that in the exercise stress area as well. We have another marker in the setting, potential of type 1 and type 2 heart attacks. Until about 2 or 3 years ago, I thought a heart attack was a heart attack. There's not. There's different grades of them, and you have to learn and understand. The differential diagnosis between a type 1 and type 2 heart attack is important because there are, the treatments can be different. And then also, as Mark and the others have elegantly alluded to, what happens after you've had the heart attack? What are the, what's the patient prognosis going to be like? And we find it very important to leverage good relationships with the CHI, of course, and other CVD researchers around the world. And this is our merry crew. So up here is Kieran Gina. He's the CEO of the company. He's about 32, and he's an extremely able and knowledgeable and very smart 32. And then we have also scientific assistance. Where is the mouse? Oh, there it is. From Robert Powell. And we brought in these 2 pirate-looking chaps here, John Pickering on a data analytics consultant, and Prof. Martin Tan as well. He's a clinical consultant from the point of view of the ED. And this is the board itself. There's Colin Dawson, who used to be the head of Otago Innovation. He now is chair of our board of directors, and he has a lot of other companies and interests that he's involved with. Roland Toda, who is he's a PhD in genetics as well, but he's very involved in the company situation in New Zealand. 2 USA-based directors, a chap called Gary Pace and Professor Judith Swain, who's a trained cardiologist as well, and David Christensen there from Royal, who's representing Otago's interests. And on our panel of medical advisory board, Anthony DeMaria here, who's a cardiologist, used to be the editor of Jack, James Giannuzzi and Frank Peacock, who are well-known collaborators to our group, and Prof. Mark Richards, without who we probably couldn't get half of this done. And so that's it. So that's Upstream in a nutshell. Thank you.
Kia ora koutou and talofa lava. We're changing tact now. We're actually changing modes of transport, really. We've gone from new technologies to old technologies now. But this is talking about, well, this presentation is about going back to grassroots level. And I've called it Navigating the Moana, because the Moana, or the ocean, is the one element that connects Aotearoa and the Pacific Islands. And so actually the CHI, or Christchurch Heart Institute, have jumped into the waka with Māori and Pacifica researchers to go out and do cardiovascular disease research in Māori and Pacifica communities. And even before equity became a big thing, as it is now, actually this was equity, or trying to address equity, even before it became popular. So, this is a traditional, or a typical Polynesian waka. When you jump on board, you are a crew member and you actually have a role to play. Also too, you are actually quite visible as well. So in your crew, you'll always have a star navigator, someone who understands the environment, understands the winds and the currents, and the landmarks, so that they can direct the crew to manoeuvre the waka to their destination. And so for the CHI, the first voyage was with the Māori Indigenous Health Institute. And it was a Māori-led research project called the Hawaramanua Community Heart Study, and led by Professor Suzanne Pitama, who we all know, who has amazing impact in the education here at Otago Medical School. And below is just some of the crew, but we actually also have some of the crew here in the audience as well, who helped out with the study, such as Mark Richards, Richard Troughton, Gary Nichols, Swaitonia also helped out with the study. But in this photo, I just wanted to point out that there are two non-Māori. So the rest are Māori researchers, or helped with the research. And when you've got a team of strong Māori researchers and you go into a Māori community, for us non-Māori researchers, we actually feel really safe. And so we were appropriately culturally guided by our fellow crew members as well. The overall aim of the study too was to actually profile, at the time, current cardiovascular risk factor profiles in two Māori communities. So going into one Māori community is a lot of work, but going to two is even more than that. So the two communities were Wairoa in the Hawke's Bay, that's a rural community. Ngāti Kahungunu is the iwi, and the second is here in Otautahi, Ngai Tahu being the iwi too. Before going into these communities though, there needs to be a connection to the mana whenua. And fortunately within Mihi, we had connections to both communities. Suzanne Pitama is Ngāti Kahungunu, and then we have others in the team like Mātia Gillies, Tanya Huria, who are affiliated with Ngai Tahu. So we began this study by actually going into Wairoa first of all. And so for each of these cohorts, we had to recruit 250 people, which doesn't sound a lot, but actually it's a lot of hard work in the background. So what we did is we jumped on our little waka of Air New Zealand, and this is us at the airport, and Vicky showed this photo before. I don't know if Vicky remembered this story, but as we all got onto the plane, the captain's voice came over and said, "Oh, is there anyone here who would like to offload their luggage because we're too heavy? The plane can't leave unless we are the right weight." And I think it was due to our two containers of titi that we took up as koha. But we had a lot of gear. And so we started off in Wairoa, and we were based at the Wairoa Hospital. So they kindly gave us a few clinic rooms to base ourselves in, like a year, and for repeated visits. What we did have in the study, which is kind of outside of the outcomes for a typical grant, was actually having our medical students, our Māori medical students, come in and participate in the research. We also had our Auckland crew, Rob, and the echocardiographers come in as well to take part in the study. And as you can see in the background, you probably can't see too well, there's a Māori man who's lying on the bed with a blue gown on. Part of the study protocol was to perform an echo on every single participant in the community, and they were pretty lucky to get an echo. But normally in a hospital setting, you'd be lying on the bed, bare-chested. And so for part of the crew, or our research team, we thought, no, that's actually not going to be acceptable for Māori. And so, as well as researchers, we became fashion designers for the clinic wear, and we designed a gown which the echocardiographer could still access and measure the things that they needed to do, but it also made the participant feel comfortable and safe. And we thought originally that, for women that would be kind of, they'd take it on board, but the males we found also actually accepted that as well. In addition to the crew, we had people on the ground who actually helped us recruit our participants. And in the photo at the bottom, we've got Hilary, who was a nurse who knew the community really well, Suzanne's mother, who's hugging Hilary, but also importantly our kaumatua, Uncle Burton, who also helped to rally participants in Wairoa. So we managed to, over the year, recruit about 252 participants in Wairoa, and we had a great time doing that. We also then had to repeat that in Christchurch, which happened. We based ourselves at the St Elmo's Court, if you remember that pink building, before it got knocked down, for about a year. And what we soon realised when analysing some of this data was actually we're collecting all this data, but this is actually becoming an intervention for some of these participants. So from really small matters like losing weight to really big matters like the guy in the top right here. Came in as a young, fit Māori male who would run marathons, had his echo, and was told actually he needed to stop running marathons, and that in the years to come he would actually have to undergo heart surgery. And I think Gary Nichols was the one that walked him over to the hospital, he probably doesn't remember, to come and actually have a full echo performed on him. So he did actually go on to have heart surgery, and he's actually grateful to the study that was picked up at the time. So you do have those incidental findings, but as well as collecting the data and analysing it and publishing the data, you have all these other impacts that affect the communities at large. We also stayed in contact with all of these participants for 5 years regularly. So we actually had face-to-face visits at year 2 and year 5, and then throughout that time we would send them sort of newsletters, two newsletters a year, just to stay in contact with them. And so that was the first voyage. And the second voyage is the Pacifica Heart Study. So naturally, the Pacific are our neighbours, and I am a Samoan, so I'm a Pacific Islander myself. And we recruited some our participants here in Christchurch, again partnering up with a Pacific health provider here, which made it much easier to access and also base ourselves to perform our studies. Similarly, we were also looking at cardiovascular risk factors and biomarkers. As well, we had some of our Pacific friends help out with the study as well. Important to try and sort of build up that capacity and the experience for our Pacific people, because, again, trying to address the equity issue for Pacific health. And so we've also got some ongoing exciting studies for this Pacifica Heart Study, interventions, as well as some work with the biomarker NT-proBNP, which just watch this space. And then just some reflections. I think, the Chi have partnered up really well with Māori and Pacifica researchers to enable us to tell our stories. It's important to have that perspective, particularly when you're working with communities. Doing research that's responsive and socially accountable is really key. But also staying connected, because as in travelling in a waka, going from point A to point B, it's a long journey, And similarly, with working with Māori and Pacifica communities, it's a long relationship. Health research as an intervention, which was just a great byproduct of the research, building workforce capacity, and obviously publishing our research. And thank you.